another episode of Storytellers, and I think that I have one of the ultimate storytellers on the pod today. I'm really excited to welcome someone I grew up watching and have become increasingly inspired by. And now she has two fun shows coming out that go in a completely different direction than how you might know her. That I'm really excited to have on Storytellers, Holly Madison.
Thank
Hi.
you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I grew up watching you on E, and now I'm excited to watch you in the Playboy Murders, which is set to return on January 22nd on ID. You've entered this true crime space.
Yeah, it's really exciting to me because I love telling true stories. Some of the stories, both in season one and season two, I hadn't even heard of before. So I was really excited to dive in and learn more about it. And just getting into other people's perspectives, whether it's through their interviews or what some of the people who are no longer with us wrote, it's just super interesting to me. And I love, presenting it. And I've got so much positive feedback on season one, and I can't wait for everybody to see season two.
So the Playboy Murders explores kind of the dark side of the Playboy Mansion and some of the like crazy things that went on that no one really knows about, that was never really released to the public and, almost hushed away. Did people talk, like when you were in the mansion, did people talk about these things, or there rumblings, or it was really kept quiet?
Well, some things are more high profile, like the Dorothy Stratton case we cover in season two. That was a very high profile case that, of course, I knew about. As far as like what was going on, in the house, like relationship wise, a lot of it was very secret and you wouldn't know about it unless you were like living upstairs at the mansion. Even some of the people who came to parties and stuff were really unaware of a lot of the things that were going on. And some of these cases too that are connected with Playboy, like I said, I didn't even know about and I was learning about for the first time. And it's so interesting to tell these stories, especially some of the ones that happened in decades past where women weren't as listened to. And a lot of the women involved were reduced to just these headlines, or, one of them worked as a Playboy Bunny at the club for like 3 weeks. So every headline about her was Playboy Bunny. And she was kind of portrayed as being kind of this, femme fatale killer. She was framed for murder. And she was so much more than that. She was a police officer, she had all kinds of interests and a full life, and nobody ever talked about that. So I love that we're able to get into it more and really rediscover who these people are and not just reduce them to one thing, because sometimes if people are a little more closed-minded, they think, oh, if a woman posed nude, she was asking for it, or, she deserved it. And they kind of like write her off as almost like a subhuman thing. And we really want to dive in and like get to know these people and like the human side of these stories.
Well, it seems like it's a really great transition for you from kind of captivating your own story and taking control of your own story yourself through your memoirs, and then allowing these women to do the same, being the voice for them. Was that kind of your thought when you went into these projects?
Yeah, well, I love telling about, what happened behind the scenes. It starts like with our rewatch podcast, Girls Next Door. We talk about what happened really behind the scenes and what we were going through, and like, the full perspective from us that wasn't really allowed in the edit too much.
Mm.
And when I approach these stories, I always want to be really sensitive because these were real people with real families. And there's so many people who are no longer here to tell their stories, both the victims and then other people involved who've just passed away because the stories happened so long ago. And I just really want to take that care and like portray them as full individuals and try to find empathy from where they were coming from. And hopefully a lot of the viewers can relate. Like I always say, these stories, you might not be able to relate to their lifestyle or things they experienced, but you'll be able to relate to them.
Mhm.
You'll find somebody in the series you can relate to a little bit, I think.
For sure. Now, in the first episode, it goes through the Bentley twins, and that was when you first came to the mansion. And so, how was it for you, like looking back at that time, like going even before, you were with Hugh, it was, you were young and you were witnessing this as it played out.
Yeah, I remember my first mansion party. It was such a big, elaborate, beautiful party. I was so blown away by everything. And I was blown away by Sandy and Mandy too. They were so gorgeous. I thought they were the prettiest people I'd ever seen. So that day kind of made a big impression on me as far as shaping what the world of Playboy was supposed to look like and what I thought it should look like in its most, exciting form. And then they moved out before I moved in. But I remember not too long after I moved in, maybe within a few years, I was at the dinner table and one of Hef's friends was telling me a story about how Sandy's boyfriend was tragically killed in this still unsolved case that took so many twists and turns leading up to the murders. It just is so crazy. It's like if you wrote this thing, you couldn't write it as fiction because people would think you were being too dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems like too, when you recall the story, and for the cameras and you're kind of going through the motions of like what you saw and how this was also the time that Hugh adopted having like multiple girlfriends at once. And it was kind of this gimmick. When you were there and witnessing it, did you think in those moments like this is different, or were you like enamored with what was happening and being there?
I think when Hef first started doing the multiple girlfriend thing, pop culture accepted it as this curiosity, but everybody kind of took it as like this cute, funny grandpa. And like, even though he would say he had sex with the girls and he did, I don't know if people really believed that. I think a lot of people looked at it and thought, oh, he's 75. He can't keep up with them. This is just silly. This is just for publicity. This is just like to sell magazines and the lifestyle. But once I got involved, I realized the thing was so much more intense than I ever could have thought.
You talk in especially this episode too, and you've talked about it before, the rules,
Mhm.
that these particularly in this episode, that some of these rules were broken and a few people end up dead because of it. Did you ever risk stepping outside of those rules, or were you, a rule follower?
Very much a rule follower. I was so scared to step out of line. I had nothing outside the house. I was far from my family. I didn't know anybody in LA. I felt like after I moved in, I felt like everybody's kind of judging me for that decision. And it kind of felt almost embarrassing. Like everybody knew. I didn't know how I would leave and like go back to a normal job. It all seemed like something I needed a little more time to figure out. So I was very terrified of the thought of like possibly being like kicked out before I was ready, because I saw girls get kicked out because they were caught out with another guy or something. And I mean, their stuff packed up and like thrown out the back gate. And that seemed really scary to me. So I definitely followed all the rules to a T.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had recalled that too in the episode, that you just had seen, you'd seen what happens to those that
Yeah.
don't follow the rules, and so that would kind of keep you within the bounds. Did you feel like within the mansion, you've really found your voice and your niche, and it seems like your purpose in the last several years between your YouTube channel and Disney and just as a mom, did you feel like you had a voice when you were there and in the mansion? Like,
Not at all in
no.
any way. I was always, even on the reality show, I was very reserved because I didn't really want to do a reality show. It wasn't the type of entertainment industry stuff I wanted to do. I never wanted to be like famous for my personal life, ultimate irony. So I was very reserved and very, just trying to act as like boring as possible, hoping nobody would criticize me. Spoiler alert, that doesn't work. People will still criticize you. But yeah, I always said everything just to script, how I thought Hef would want me to say it. And I never felt like I had a voice. We didn't even have social media back then, really. We had MySpace, that was it. And I just didn't really feel like I could express myself. It all had to be within the boundaries of what I thought Hef would approve of.
Hmm. And when or how was it that you finally were like, you've said you've always wanted to be a writer and you've always wanted to have, tell your story in some way. When were you like, this is my, like, you found the words, you found the confidence?
Well, I think it was about 4 years after I moved out of the mansion. And I don't think it was finding so much my confidence as just feeling like I couldn't live this fake life anymore. Because what happened is after I left, people would ask me about Hef or, how was that every day of my life? Like I couldn't leave the house without somebody approaching me and asking me about it because people knew me from the show. And I would always say nice things because I thought that was the nice thing to do, even though he wasn't necessarily saying nice things about me. If he was asked about me in an interview, he'd say something very snarky. So I started to feel, a little bit bad about that. And it just got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. Like I was moving on, I got married, I was pregnant, and people were still asking me about this, and I felt like I was being expected to be a cheerleader and paint positively an experience that was deeply miserable for me, truly,
Mhm.
if I look back at it. And when you're living a lie like that and constantly having to like cover up and like make things look pretty and nice when they weren't, you start to feel it in your gut. You start to feel like you're getting sick and you can't take it anymore and you just want to lash out. So I got really quiet for a while I was working on the book. I wouldn't do one interview. If people would ask me about it in public, I'd kind of get cranky and, people were probably like, what's going on with her? And then I just finally told my whole truth in a book. I did it while he was still alive, so he was free to respond however he wanted to. And it wasn't even so much finding confidence. It was just like, I felt like I had to do it. I had to get it out there or I was going to like die.
Yeah. Well, and it does. I mean, things manifest in you and
Mhm.
you feel sick, your hair falls out, you break out, and especially, I mean, you're carrying a child, like you don't want to bring that energy to
Absolutely.
your kid and that, I mean, it makes so much sense that that would
Yeah.
be the time to do it for sure. Um, Now that you've kind of taken control of your own story and redirected the public narrative into your truth, how do you handle looking back on it? Or are you like, I'm moved on, like I don't even think about it?
In my day-to-day life, I've moved on, but I do a podcast called Girls Next Level with Bridget, and we go back and we recap the episodes. And it's fun to do. It's fun to be able to tell people what was really going on and kind of like reclaim that and tell people what was fake and what wasn't. And sometimes I notice things now that I didn't even notice back then. And it's just fun to be able to like meet up with Bridget a couple times a month and film a couple episodes. And it's fun and the listeners love it and we're having fun with it.
Yeah. And there's nothing like that's ever triggering or anything, or do you sometimes have to take a step back?
Oh no, there's definitely triggering moments. And sometimes it comes up when I least expect it. Like sometimes I think, okay, it's good. We're watching season 2 of Girls Next Door now. There shouldn't be anything really triggering. But then we were talking about an episode recently where it's a cold open, where it's like Hef and the three of us girls in bed and we're all in matching pajamas. And the idea is, he's telling us we're going to Europe because this is the episode where we go to Europe. And the idea is we're all supposed to be like gathered there at the end of the day, like a family watching a movie, so wholesome, but also the audience is supposed to be able to think, oh, they might have sex after. And even talking about it, like Bridget was saying, how cute she thinks the scene is. And I'm gagging and I want to die. And I don't know if it's just because that was my bedroom and I felt like it was kind of invasive for scenes to be set up like that, or if I felt really grossed out that it was kind of a gross situation that was trying to be repackaged as like family friendly. Like if you wanted to view it through that lens, it was more like, oh, grandpa and these 3 girls. Cause I know a lot of people who grew up watching it genuinely saw it that way and didn't even think about the sex aspect. But also they want that wink and a nod to like the older audience, like, oh, they might be having sex. And at that point in time, that wasn't even going on at the house or in the relationship. And it was something that was, kind of traumatizing to me when it was going on. And it just like made me gag and I didn't even want to talk about it. And I was grossed out that anybody thought that scene was cute.
Yeah. I mean, and then when you put it in that perspective, you're like, oh my God, I'm like, oh, like, and in the moments, those moments, did you feel those feelings that you were kind of like traumatized and stuff, or like you knew it was wrong?
I didn't like doing those scenes. I remember in season 3, they wanted us to do like a best of episode. And we were all supposed to gather in bed wearing the matching pajamas. Like we're all just watching the episodes back, reminiscing. And it was so fake. And I was always so grossed out by those scenes. And I just wanted it to be over with. And I remember, I think the executive producer had some preconceived notion of how he thought we would react. And we weren't really giving him what he wanted. And he got really mad. And it was just a hateful day. Like you can even see in that episode, like there's a group hug scene at the end, which is really fake and contrived, and anything, fake and contrived about the relationship really grossed me out. And you can even see I'm like rolling my eyes in that. It's just, I hated it then and I hate it more now.
Right. Do you think that if you didn't do the show, you maybe wouldn't have left as soon as you did?
I feel like I wouldn't have felt as empowered to leave because the show gave me a lot of confidence. Like the show wasn't perfect by any means. And, we have a lot to complain about when we watch some of the
Or
cuts. But at the end of the day, the show was a positive experience and it did save my life in a lot of ways because before that, I felt very bleak and hopeless in the relationship and that there was nothing for me outside of the relationship. And I was kind of like in this mental cage, and being able to do the show and have opportunities come my way because of the show, it gave me a lot of confidence. And I think even more than the show, like I went to work at the Playboy studio for 2 years before I left. I was the photo editor and directed the Playmate pictorials. And that gave me so much confidence just to have like a 9 to 5 job where I went somewhere else and
Mhm.
interacted with real people. Like that really opened my eyes and really changed things. So I think if the show hadn't happened, I might have been stuck there. I don't know. Like I might never have woke up or felt confident enough to leave or felt like I had the resources to like make a life for myself. I was always so scared of going out and like, what if I can't even get a normal job because everybody hates me and thinks I'm like gross for being in that situation? Like I had such a complex about it.
Right, of course, of course. And you were probably given so much of that there too, that to make you just believe that so you wouldn't leave.
For
Um,
sure.
and I feel like too, there's such a big conversation now, especially about women, when you get married, like make sure you still have your own money and make sure you're still
Yeah.
making your own money and like feeling really empowered in that. My mom always said she was like a better mom when she was working because
Yeah, for sure.
had something that was yours and like still made
Mhm.
you feel human and
Yeah.
not you were working for your family.
And you're like refreshed when you get back to your kids. I feel that way too. I feel like having a full life makes me a better mom for sure.
Yeah, oh, I love that.
Mhm.
Now when it comes to Lethally Blonde as well, so that is premiering in March, and this tackles true crime and just public situations, public dramas, and you are going through these stories episode by episode. Now, did you pick like how much of a say and how involved were you in choosing what was going to be covered and like all the research and things like that?
I didn't choose the Lethally Blonde stories. The production team is so great at finding stories, and the show was the network's idea, and they had this idea of what it wanted to be. And I was on board. If it was anything like the Playboy Murders, I was so excited to do it. So they brought me these cases. They're all super intriguing. They're not Playboy specific, obviously, but they're all from very interesting walks of life and intriguing industries that people don't necessarily know a lot about.
Now I was reading in another interview, you had talked about yourself, you described yourself as an introvert.
Yes.
Um, but you are so in the public eye and you
Weird.
are like, I'm so curious. I mean, from between honestly, from the mansion to all the work you're doing now, like, how do you recharge and how did you recharge? How has that changed now, when your social battery is drained?
I'm still working on that. I had a lot of goals for the new year, and two of my New Year's resolutions was one, don't get stressed out over stuff that doesn't matter. And two, like schedule my sleep time like it's work. So I'm definitely getting enough sleep, and I'm already kind of messed up on that last night. So I'm mad about it, but I'm still trying to make that a priority and trying to recharge. Like I have a whole health regime with like red light therapy I do every morning and making sure I work out. So that's definitely a huge goal in the new year.
And do you do anything in particular to take care of your mental health? I know you just opened up about your autism diagnosis. Did you find any relief in that and receiving that diagnosis?
Absolutely. The diagnostic process is really interesting. It happened over a course of 7 different appointments with my therapist. She also took appointments with my mom, with my ex-husband, with other people to give her feedback on what I was like and things like that. So it was so helpful. She's such an amazing doctor, and she's so, validating, and just talking to her was so helpful, and just knowing what's going on with me is so helpful. As far as taking care of my mental health, I really have to be cognizant of how I'm consuming social media, and just remembering that people who write posts aren't always in the best frame of mind. And there's a lot of half asleep people, making rude comments that are just having a bad day. So I really have to put that in perspective. But also, my friendship with Bridget, like we really lean on each other as far as like venting about when something stressful happens. And we always like put it in perspective for the other one. So I think having a good friend to lean on, being cognizant about how you handle your social media and the feedback you get from that, and also making sure you get enough sleep is really important.
Oh, I love all of that advice. And I really love your New Year's resolutions. I think that that is something that everyone should take into account. Just looking ahead, do you plan to write another book? Do you want to partner up with your boyfriend on a ghost adventures, series, something along those lines? What's next for you?
I don't have any immediate plans to write a book. I always felt like I want to do like a young adult series when I'm older, but right now I just like to continue working in true crime. I really love it. I love telling these stories. I wouldn't
Amazing.
turn down ghost hunting either, but
Yeah, I know. Well, I've seen that you've said that you've had some interactions with the paranormal in some of your houses and things like that. So, I mean, it would just be interesting to hear.
oh yeah, it'd be so fun. Do like a paranormal sightseeing road trip or something.
Or like a Disney theme, like something that brings that in for you,
Yeah,
like
yeah, I love
did. Oh,
that.
fun.
Yeah.
So the Playboy Murders returns Monday, January 22nd at 10 p.m. on ID, and then Lethally Blonde March 25th at 10 p.m. on ID. So mark your calendars, and we are so excited to watch. Holly, thank you.
It's just great talking to you.